15 minutes. That's how long it may have taken for Maura Murray to completely vanish from Route 112 in New Hampshire. The timeline is precise. A bus driver spotted the 21-year-old nursing student at her crashed car around 7:30 p.m., and police arrived at 7:46 p.m. to find her gone. In those crucial 15 minutes, a young woman managed to disappear so thoroughly that even modern technology and FBI resources haven't been able to trace her path. No footprints in the snow, no sightings, no evidence of where she went. What if those minutes hide a different story? But Maura's disappearance didn't begin that cold February night. The mystery actually started hours earlier, with a single decision that would change everything. The death email that started everything. At exactly 1:20 p.m. on February 9, 2004, Maura Murray sits at her computer and types out an email that would become one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence in her case. She tells her professor there's been a death in the family and she needs to miss a week of classes. The professor reads it, offers condolences, and grants the absence. Case closed, right? Wrong. There was no death in the family. Not even close. But what if this wasn't just a simple lie to skip school? What if this email was actually the first move in a carefully planned disappearance? Here's where things get really interesting. The timing of this email wasn't random. Maura sent it hours before she would pack her car, withdraw money, and drive into the White Mountains. That's not the behavior of someone making desperate, last-minute decisions. Now, consider this chilling detail. According to her academic records, Maura had never lied to her professors before. Never. She was a responsible student who showed up, did the work, and communicated honestly with faculty. So why break that pattern now? Why choose this moment to fabricate a family death? This dramatic shift in behavior suggests Maura was planning something specific, not just running away on impulse. Maura's sister Julie believes the email was a strategic move to create a buffer, allowing Maura to leave without immediate questions about her whereabouts. The choice of a family death as her cover story was particularly calculated. Death is the ultimate conversation stopper. Nobody questions someone dealing with death in the family. Nobody asks for details or proof. It's the perfect lie because it shuts down all follow-up questions immediately. The email gave her a full week of absence. Not a few days, not just missing one class. A full week. Why would someone need 7 days to handle a family death unless they knew they wouldn't be coming back at all? The timeline suggests Maura understood she was buying herself substantial time away from normal life. After sending the email, Maura didn't waste time. She spent the rest of the day making methodical preparations. She packed her car, gathered her belongings, and made several phone calls to hotels in Bartlett, New Hampshire, and Vermont. This wasn't panic behavior. This was systematic execution of a plan that began with that false death email. The fake death email wasn't a desperate student trying to avoid responsibility. It was a carefully crafted piece of misdirection that gave Maura the freedom to disappear without raising immediate red flags. But here's the question that keeps investigators awake at night. If Maura was planning to disappear, why did she specifically need to lie about a family death? What was she really preparing for that required such an elaborate deception? The answer might lie in what happened next. Because after creating her perfect alibi, Maura made another calculated move that afternoon. The $280 mystery, money for what? She walked up to an ATM that afternoon and withdrew around $280 in cash. Not a round number like $300 or $250, but this specific amount that nearly emptied her account. This wasn't someone grabbing whatever money they could for an emergency road trip. The withdrawal was deliberate and calculated. Financial records reveal something fascinating about this transaction. In 2004, $280 wasn't typical for routine college expenses, but it was far more than Maura's usual spending patterns. Her sister Julia has mentioned how Maura had been systematically managing her money in the weeks leading up to February 9th, making smaller withdrawals and carefully building up to this larger amount. This wasn't impulsive spending. She was deliberately accumulating cash for something specific. Here's what makes this withdrawal even more intriguing. Maura's banking history shows a consistent pattern of small, regular withdrawals for normal college expenses. The $280 withdrawal was completely out of character, representing nearly all of her available funds. This dramatic change in her spending behavior indicates something significant was happening in her life. Why did she choose that amount, enough to nearly empty her account, but more than a week's typical budget? The precision suggests she knew exactly how much she needed. This wasn't someone estimating expenses for a spontaneous trip. Someone had given her a specific number, or she had calculated exactly what she required for whatever came next. The cash-only nature of this transaction creates another puzzle. When you pay for legitimate services, you typically use credit cards or checks that leave a paper trail. Cash payments are invisible to anyone trying to track activities later. Maura specifically chose the payment method that would make her transaction untraceable. Consider the timing of this withdrawal. Maura sent her fake death email in the early afternoon, then immediately went to the ATM to get this money. The sequence suggests these actions were connected. She created her alibi, then obtained the cash she needed for whatever came next. This coordination proves her disappearance involved careful financial planning. The most unsettling aspect is how this amount aligned with various services available in 2004. $280 could cover transportation costs, accommodation, or payment to someone providing off-the-books assistance. The amount was substantial enough to secure real help, but not so large as to be impossible for a college student to obtain. What's particularly striking is that Maura had never made a withdrawal this large before. Her previous transactions were small and predictable. This sudden shift to withdrawing nearly everything she had suggests urgency and necessity. This wasn't discretionary spending. This was payment for something she considered essential. The $280 withdrawal reveals that Maura's disappearance definitely involved a financial component. Whether she was paying for assistance with her plans or responding to some external pressure, this money was central to whatever happened next. The calculated nature of this withdrawal proves her actions weren't impulsive decisions made in crisis. But the financial planning was just one piece of a larger puzzle. While Maura was busy creating her alibi and securing this mysterious cash, she was also busy at her computer, conducting searches that would reveal another layer of deception. The Vermont deception, going nowhere fast. Her computer searches that day revealed another puzzling detour in her carefully planned actions. Records show that on February 9th, Maura looked up directions to Burlington, Vermont. She spent time researching routes, checking maps, and planning what appeared to be a trip to the Green Mountain State. But here's the problem: Maura never went to Vermont. She drove straight to New Hampshire instead, ending up on a remote road where her car would crash that evening. This makes absolutely no sense unless you consider that Maura might have been planning one route while her car ended up on another, adding another layer to this mystery. She takes the time to research Vermont directions, creating a digital footprint that points north, then immediately drives in a completely different direction. That's not confusion or a last-minute change of plans. That's something else entirely. The Vermont searches weren't quick, casual lookups either. These were detailed research sessions conducted hours before she packed her car and left campus. She had plenty of time to change her mind about destinations, but what makes this particularly odd is Maura's previous familiarity with New Hampshire routes. Her father had mentioned that Maura knew the Bartlett area of New Hampshire like her backyard because the family vacationed there frequently. Given this knowledge, why would she need to research Vermont directions at all? Here's where the evidence gets really interesting. Digital records show Maura was familiar with both Vermont and New Hampshire routes from previous searches. Her browsing patterns proved she knew the difference between the two destinations. This wasn't a mistake or accidental wrong turn. Maura deliberately chose to research one location while traveling to another. Consider the specific New Hampshire location where Maura's car was found. Route 112 in North Haverhill isn't somewhere you end up by accident. It's not a main highway or popular destination. It's an incredibly remote stretch of road with limited cell service and minimal traffic. Her familiarity with New Hampshire means her choice of location was deliberate, not random. The remoteness of this crash site raises chilling questions. Could someone have specifically chosen this isolated location because it provided privacy and control? The lack of cell service would have made it impossible for Maura to call for help, and the minimal traffic meant fewer potential witnesses to whatever happened next. The timing of these Vermont searches creates another suspicious pattern. Maura researched Vermont directions, sent her fake death email, withdrew her specific $280 in cash, then drove to New Hampshire. Each action was calculated to mislead different groups of people tracking her movements. The internet searches would confuse investigators, the email would satisfy her professors, the cash withdrawal left no paper trail, and the New Hampshire destination was the real plan all along. Her searches suggest she might have been planning one route, but her car ended up on another. The Vermont-New Hampshire switch proves Maura was actively working to mislead anyone tracking her movements. But this level of misdirection suggests careful planning that goes beyond simple teenage deception. The digital deception was just one piece of her methodical preparation that day. While she was creating false trails online, Maura was also making another stop that would reveal just how calculated her final day really was. The accident forms, preparing for disaster. That same morning, Maura made another stop that adds to the mystery of her methodical preparation. She picked up accident forms from her university, specifically paperwork related to her father's car, which she had damaged in a previous crash just days earlier. Here's what makes this detail so puzzling. The paperwork for her father's car should have already been filed with insurance companies and authorities after the earlier incident. That accident was over, dealt with, resolved. So why was Maura collecting fresh accident forms on the morning she disappeared? This wasn't routine behavior for someone who had never handled accident paperwork before, according to her family. The timing creates a detail that investigators can't ignore. Maura gets accident forms in the morning, then crashes her own car that same evening. Insurance experts who reviewed this sequence found it highly unusual and completely outside normal procedure. When you damage a car, you file the paperwork once. You don't keep going back for more forms unless something new is about to happen. What makes this even more intriguing is that Maura wasn't experienced with insurance claims or crash documentation. She had never dealt with this type of bureaucratic process before. Yet on this particular morning, she suddenly felt compelled to collect accident forms. This represented completely new territory for her, making the decision even more out of character. The forms weren't just picked up randomly either. These were specific documents related to vehicle accidents, obtained hours before she would find herself in exactly that situation. The coordination seems too precise to dismiss as simple coincidence, but the reason behind her actions remains unexplained. Consider how these forms fit into the larger pattern of her day. Faked death email to create an alibi. Vermont internet searches while planning to drive to New Hampshire. Cash withdrawal of nearly all her available money. Accident forms collected hours before needing them. Each action was calculated to handle a different aspect of whatever was about to happen. The presence of these forms inside Maura's car after the crash, as confirmed by her sister Julie, proves she was carrying them when she disappeared. She wasn't just collecting paperwork for future reference. She was actively transporting accident forms on her final journey, suggesting she somehow expected to need them. Investigators note she collected fresh accident paperwork hours before her own crash, a detail that remains unexplained. The accident forms represent one of several unexplained anomalies documented by her family, and in official reports. Whether this represents incredible coincidence or some form of preparation, the timing eliminates random chance as a simple explanation. The level of methodical planning throughout February 9th proves Maura's disappearance involved careful coordination. From the morning email through the afternoon preparations to the evening crash, each step followed a logical sequence toward a predetermined outcome. But the most crucial piece of this puzzle might be the crash itself. The impossible crash, evidence that doesn't add up. When investigators examined the physical evidence from Route 112, they discovered something that changes everything about Maura's disappearance. The official story says Maura hit a tree, but when her family hired a private vehicle reconstructionist to analyze the crash, the findings revealed a completely different scenario. The damage pattern on Maura's Saturn didn't match what you'd expect from hitting a stationary object like a tree. Julie Murray, Maura's sister, revealed that the analysis showed the front driver's side damage was inconsistent with a tree impact. The buckling of the hood and the way the radiator support bent suggested the car was moving forward under its own power when the damage occurred. This wasn't a car that slammed into something and stopped. This was a car that got hit by something else. Here's where things get really disturbing. Inside Maura's vehicle, investigators found a Chrysler car part. But Maura drove a Saturn. There were no Chrysler vehicles reported anywhere near the crash site that night. So how does a piece of another car end up inside Maura's vehicle? The only logical explanation is that another vehicle was involved in this crash, and that vehicle was close enough to leave parts behind. The white scuff mark on Maura's rear bumper tells an even more chilling story. When investigators tested the paint from this mark, it didn't match any trees or road barriers along Route 112. The paint came from another vehicle. Someone hit Maura's car from behind, leaving their mark on her bumper. But here's what makes this evidence even more suspicious. Witnesses reported seeing a white Jeep Grand Cherokee fleeing the scene when police arrived. The paint from the scuff mark matched this white vehicle that was spotted leaving the area. Now consider this disturbing detail that bus driver Bruce Atwood specifically noted. Despite the significant damage to Maura's Saturn, there were no corresponding marks on the tree she supposedly hit. Think about basic physics for a moment. If a car hits a tree hard enough to cause major front-end damage, that tree should show some evidence of impact. Bark should be scraped off, wood should be damaged, something should indicate a collision occurred. But the tree on Route 112 showed no signs of being hit by anything. Crash experts hired by her family concluded another vehicle must have been involved. The damage patterns, the foreign car parts, the paint transfer, and the lack of tree damage all point to another vehicle's involvement. But this wasn't a random collision between two drivers. The precision and location suggest something planned and deliberate. Could someone have been following Maura, and deliberately forced her to crash at that specific, remote location? The evidence suggests this possibility can't be dismissed. Route 112 was isolated, with limited cell service and minimal traffic. It would be the ideal location for someone to force a crash without witnesses or immediate help arriving. The remoteness wasn't coincidental. It was strategic. The physical evidence from the crash scene proves that Maura's accident was actually a collision with another vehicle. Someone else was definitely there when she disappeared. This revelation transforms the entire case from a missing person mystery into something much darker. We're not looking at a college student who crashed her car and wandered into the woods. We're looking at a potential abduction that was carefully staged to look like an accident. But the crash itself was only the beginning. What happened in the minutes immediately following would prove even more crucial to understanding Maura's fate. The 15-minute window, Someone was waiting. The timeline of those crucial minutes reveals the true impossibility of Maura's vanishing act. At 7:27 p.m. on February 9, 2004, someone called 911 to report a car accident on Route 112. School bus driver Bruce Atwood encountered Maura at her crashed Saturn around 7:35 p.m., offering help. She declined, claiming she had already contacted AAA for assistance. Atwood left the scene, made his own 911 call at 7:43 p.m., and police arrived at 7:46 p.m. to find the car locked and completely empty. Maura Murray had vanished in just 15 minutes. But here's what makes this timeline absolutely impossible under normal circumstances. Search and rescue experts who studied this case say it's virtually impossible for someone to disappear so completely in such a short window without help or transportation. We're talking about 15 minutes in freezing February weather, on a remote mountain road, with fresh snow covering the ground. Yet somehow, Maura managed to leave no trace whatsoever. The area around the crash was searched thoroughly by multiple agencies using trained dogs, helicopters, and ground teams. They found nothing. Search teams found no footprints in fresh snow despite trained dogs following her scent, a detail noted by local search efforts in police logs. No torn clothing on branches, no dropped items, no evidence that anyone had walked into the surrounding woods. Local resident Steve Loud specifically noted that no tracks led into the woods near the crash site. Local residents who lived along Route 112 reported no unusual activity or sightings that night. No one saw a woman walking along the road. No one noticed someone hitchhiking or asking for help. In a small community where strangers stick out, especially someone in distress on a cold winter night, Maura somehow became completely invisible. This means she either got into another vehicle or something else happened that we haven't considered. The most chilling possibility is that someone was already waiting at that exact crash location, ready to pick her up the moment her car stopped moving. Think about what this would require. Someone would need to know Maura's route, her timing, and the exact spot where her car would crash. This level of coordination suggests the entire sequence wasn't accidental but orchestrated. This would explain why the crash happened in such an incredibly remote area. Route 112 in North Haverhill isn't somewhere you end up by chance. It's isolated, with limited cell service and minimal traffic. But what if the remoteness wasn't a problem? What if it was the entire point? A predetermined meeting location where someone could pick up Maura without witnesses or interference. Could the entire day's events have been orchestrated by someone who knew exactly when and where Maura would be most vulnerable? The fake death email created her absence excuse. The cash withdrawal provided untraceable payment. The accident forms prepared for the crash paperwork. The Vermont internet searches misdirected potential investigators. Each piece fits together like a carefully planned operation. Did she decline help because she was waiting for someone else? We don't know, but those frozen minutes remain unexplained. Her claim about calling AAA was likely false, since cell service was extremely limited in that area. But maybe she wasn't lying about expecting help. Maybe she was expecting someone specific to pick her up. The 15-minute window proves that Maura's disappearance required coordination and advanced planning. Someone knew she would be at that exact location at that exact time. Someone was ready to act the moment she crashed. This coordination eliminates the possibility that her disappearance was spontaneous or accidental. All the evidence points toward a single, unavoidable reality. The evidence creates a disturbing pattern that can't be ignored. 5 core anomalies define Maura's final day: the false death email creating her alibi, the calculated $280 withdrawal, Vermont internet searches while driving to New Hampshire, collecting accident forms hours before crashing, and crash damage inconsistent with hitting a tree. Each piece documented by investigators points toward coordination and planning. Maura's sister Julie continues fighting for answers through her podcast and advocacy work, keeping this case in public attention after 20 years. Her efforts remind us that behind this mystery is a family still searching for their daughter and sister. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit actively investigates this as a suspicious missing person case. If you have any information, contact the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit or the FBI tip line. Your tip could finally unlock answers in this active case. Share your thoughts or any details you know in the comments below.